If you've ever been the keeper of someone else's perfect secret, you know the weight doesn't shrink over time. It grows like a vine curling around your spine. And that's why you should never skip this story. Because silence isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's revenge with lipstick on. The first time I met Caleb, he wore a white button-down open at the throat, like he was too good for collars and better than air conditioning. He sat across from me at a bar, ordered 2 tequilas, one for himself and one for me, and said, "You look like you need to forget someone." He wasn't wrong. I was 2 months post-breakup with a guy who cheated on me with his barista and thought an apology playlist was sufficient closure. Caleb was the antidote to that kind of mediocrity. He listened, but never pried. He joked, but never begged for attention. He touched me once, just brushed my wrist, and it felt like the world leaned in to watch. We saw each other 4 times after that. No last names, no phone numbers, just a hotel room, a city skyline, and conversations that felt too heavy for strangers. And then, just like that, he was gone. I woke up alone one Sunday, his side of the bed cold, no note, no message, nothing. 3 years passed. I moved on, sort of. I buried that memory in the velvet box of what could have been, alongside letters I never sent and pictures I never deleted. Then, Rachel, my best friend since 8th grade, told me she was getting married. I screamed, jumped, cried. I was genuinely happy for her. I helped pick colors. I held her hand during dress fittings. I planned her bachelorette weekend to a T. I met the groom exactly 2 months before the wedding, and I swear, for 5 solid seconds, my lungs forgot how to work. It was him, Caleb. But this time, he had a last name. This time, he held Rachel's hand. This time, he kissed her like the world leaned in to watch. He didn't flinch when he saw me. Didn't blink. Just smiled like I was another bouquet holding extra in his big-budget fairy tale. And I, God help me, I smiled back. Because I loved Rachel. Because I couldn't make sense of it yet. Because revenge doesn't scream when it enters the room. It walks in quietly, wearing a bridesmaid's dress. The first thing I told myself was that it couldn't be him. Caleb was just a name, a face in the dark. Maybe I'd imagined the curve of his jaw, the slant of his smile. Maybe I'd twisted an old memory into something cinematic. But when he said, "Nice to meet you, Ivy," at the rehearsal dinner, my spine straightened like a soldier under fire. Because he knew me. My name hadn't come up once around him yet. And still, he said it first. Too smoothly, too easily. I watched Rachel laugh beside him, curled into his side like she belonged there, like he had never touched another woman with those hands. My hands. I didn't eat that night. I drank wine until the room blurred around the edges, trying to drown the silence sitting in my throat. He ghosted me after looking me in the eye and saying I was different, after memorizing the shape of my laugh and the freckle on my head. And now he was here, wearing cufflinks and kissing Rachel's knuckles while I stood at her side holding secrets like a bouquet. I didn't sleep much after that. I told myself I owed Rachel the truth, but truth is a slippery thing when it's tangled in love. How do you tell your best friend the man she's marrying once whispered your name into a pillow? You don't. So instead, I watched how he touched her waist and leaned into her jokes, how he complimented her mom and laughed too loudly with the groomsmen. He played the part perfectly, but there was something under it, something that tugged at the corners of his mask. He didn't know me as Ivy the bridesmaid. He knew me as Ivy from that winter, the woman who once told him her dreams and wore his hoodie to sleep. 2 days before the wedding, he caught me alone in the kitchen at Rachel's parents' house. "Ivy," he said, voice like silk dipped in nerve. I turned slowly, wine glass in hand, heart pounding like a war drum. "You remembered," he smiled, that same careless smile from the hotel room. I never forget a beautiful face. I wanted to throw the glass. Instead, I took a sip. "That must make it hard to sleep, considering how many you've collected." His eyes narrowed, just for a second, but it was enough. I saw the flicker, the crack. He knew I wasn't going to disappear this time. "You're not going to tell her," he said. Not asked, said. "No," I replied, watching him closely. "I'm going to do something much worse." He tilted his head, smile tightening. "What's worse than the truth?" I leaned in, close enough that he could feel the heat of my breath on his cheek. Letting you wonder when it's coming. He didn't speak, not right away. Caleb stood there, mouth slightly parted, waiting for me to flinch or laugh or take it back. But I didn't. I let the words hang between us like a wire, taut and electric. And when I finally stepped around him and left the kitchen, I didn't look back. That night, I couldn't sleep, again. Not because of regret, no, that had burned out long ago, but because I couldn't stop picturing Rachel in her dress. She had eyes full of trust, walking toward a man who had already discarded another woman like a receipt. The ache wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even heartbreak anymore. It was betrayal, secondhand, this time. And I hated that it still hurt. That some ghost of me, some echo of that girl who once traced the curve of his jaw in a cheap hotel room, still lingered somewhere behind my ribs. The next morning, I skipped the bridesmaid's breakfast and took a walk through the neighborhood, a quiet suburb outside Charleston. It was lined with sweet gum trees and slow-moving cars. I needed space, air, a moment not filled with veil fittings and caterer drama, and Caleb's voice echoing in the halls of my memory. Rachel texted around noon. "Everything okay?" Caleb said, "You looked off last night. Wanna talk?" That made me stop walking. I stared at the message, reread it. Caleb had noticed, and instead of asking me directly, he'd gone through her. His twisted little power play. He was reminding me that he was close to her now. Closer than I'd ever been. "Just tired," I replied. "Don't worry, I'm here for you. Always." That part was still true. Back at the house, I watched him again. Noticed things Rachel wouldn't. The way his eyes scanned, always scanning. How he leaned just slightly away when she kissed his cheek. How he never let his phone leave his pocket. I started following patterns, logging behavior, gathering things without even knowing what I was looking for yet. But then came the first real slip. I was sitting on the porch swing, scrolling through seating charts on my tablet, when Caleb stepped outside and lit a cigarette. No lighter. He used matches, old-fashioned. The same as back then. He didn't see me at first. He pulled out his phone, typed quickly, then spoke into it. It was quiet, low, but I heard it. "Don't call me again. I told you it's handled." I froze. The match in his hand burned low, flickering near his knuckles. He hissed and shook it out, then turned, and there I was. I raised one eyebrow, said nothing. He pocketed the phone, work thing. "Of course," I said sweetly. "Must be hard keeping all your stories straight." He walked away this time. No comeback, no smirk. Good. Let him feel it. Let him know the bridesmaid he'd forgotten was the one who remembered everything. That night, I started digging. It began innocently enough. Rachel left her laptop open while she was in the shower, and I was supposed to be helping finalize the playlist. But curiosity's a disease once it gets in your blood, and Caleb's name was the infection I couldn't stop scratching. I opened her messages. Not to violate her privacy, I told myself, but to protect her. And that's when I saw it. An email thread, recent. Subject line, hotel confirmation, Miami. It was sent 2 weeks ago, and not to Rachel. It was forwarded to a woman named Layla Green. My stomach knotted, I clicked. A 5-day stay. 1 king bed, booked under Caleb's name. The check-in date was the same weekend he told Rachel he was at a bachelor retreat off the grid. No photos, no texts, just a story wrapped in a man's voice she trusted. Layla Green. I didn't recognize the name, but it stuck to my tongue like bad wine. I copied the email, took screenshots, sent them to myself. Then I did what I swore I wouldn't do. I opened Rachel's photos. There, nestled between pictures of flower arrangements and engagement shoots, was a selfie from Caleb, shirtless, in bed. A faint curve of a woman's thigh barely visible in the corner. Time-stamped, dated. From that weekend, I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't about ghosting or revenge fantasies, I whispered into my pillow. This was about Rachel, the girl who once held my hair back while I sobbed over a boy who said I was too intense. The friend who slept on my dorm floor for 3 nights after my dad's funeral just so I wouldn't wake up alone. She didn't deserve this. But I also knew deep in my bones that if I told her everything right now, she'd think it was jealousy, grief, old wounds masquerading as concern. Caleb had been careful, polished, practiced. I had to be smarter, so I started planning, not just how to expose him, but how to make him crumble without me ever saying a word. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to bury him in a truth so loud it couldn't be ignored. And when it all burned down, he'd know exactly who lit the match. The next morning, I started with Layla Green. She wasn't hard to find. Instagram made sure of that. Her profile was private, but her profile picture showed enough. Long black hair, bright red lipstick, the kind of beauty that knows it's being watched. She tagged a hair salon in Miami in her bio. I clicked, scrolled, found her in a few reels doing bridal hair. One even said, "Styling my favorite guy's fiance's hair today." Fiancé. That word sat in my chest like broken glass. I clicked the reel, paused, replayed. There, in the background, adjusting his collar in the salon mirror, was Caleb. He kissed her cheek before the video cut out. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I screen recorded the reel and saved it. This wasn't some fling. He wasn't cheating on Rachel with random women. He was engaged to someone else. I felt nauseous. The wedding was now just 48 hours away. Everything was in place, flowers ordered, table set, vendors paid. Rachel had no idea. And the worst part, he looked so calm, so collected. I watched him all day as we loaded the welcome bags and did the final walkthrough at the venue. He laughed at Rachel's dad's jokes. He rubbed her shoulders when she looked overwhelmed. He thanked me for being such a great friend to her. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and said, "Anything for you two." I knew if I went to Rachel now, it would explode in chaos. She'd ask for proof, Caleb would lie, and she might believe him. He was convincing like that. Calculated, I needed her to see it, the whole picture, before he had a chance to spin it. So I called in help. My cousin Sarah worked in wedding videography. I asked her to come down a day early. It was under the pretense of surprising Rachel with behind-the-scenes footage. I told her to focus on Caleb, get close-ups, interactions, mic his tucks if she could. She didn't ask questions, just said, "Got it." I planted the seed, and I waited. That night, I slipped the screenshots, the hotel confirmation, and a flash drive with the video of Caleb and Lila into a white envelope. I didn't address it, I didn't sign it, I tucked it into my purse and waited for the right moment, because silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. And tomorrow at the rehearsal dinner, I was going to deliver it to the one person Caleb never saw coming. The rehearsal dinner was held in a candlelit garden behind a boutique inn, the kind of place where everything smelled like rosemary and rosewater and money. String lights twinkled overhead, laughter hummed through the hedges, guests toasted to love with champagne flutes. While Rachel beamed in a silk jumpsuit that made her look like she'd floated in from a dream. And Caleb? He wore navy blue and arrogance. He worked the crowd effortlessly, hands on shoulders, perfectly timed compliments, kisses on Rachel's cheek every 10 minutes like clockwork. No one suspected a thing, but I wasn't here to make noise. I was here to drop a bomb in silence. I watched Caleb from the far end of the table, sipping wine slowly, clutching the envelope inside my bag. I'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times in my head. I thought I'd feel vindicated, maybe even powerful, but all I felt was this deep, cold ache in my chest. I didn't want to destroy Rachel's happiness. I wanted to save her from a lie so polished it had fooled everyone, even me. Halfway through dinner, I slipped away. I found Sarah near the catering van, adjusting her lens. "He's mic'd," she said. "Picked up some stuff earlier, nothing juicy yet." "That's okay," I said. "You'll get it." Then I handed her the envelope. "Deliver this to her bridal suite tomorrow morning. Slide it under the door if no one's there. Don't say a word." Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. We shared a look, one that only blood understands, and she nodded. "Got it." Back at the table, Caleb caught my eye. He smiled, not warmly, knowingly, like he thought the silence meant he'd won. So I raised my glass to him. "To secrets," I murmured, too quiet for anyone but him to hear. His smile faltered. "Just enough." After dinner, Rachel pulled me aside as we helped pack gift bags into the car. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been kind of quiet today." I forced a soft laugh. "Just tired, and emotional. You're getting married tomorrow. She grinned, teary-eyed. Can you believe it? No, I thought, not for a second. But I said, you deserve everything, Rach. Don't let anyone take that from you. She hugged me hard. I held on a little longer than I should have, because I knew what tomorrow would bring. The storm I had set in motion. The moment her world would split open, but not because I wanted her to suffer, because I needed her to finally see. Not just Caleb, but me. The girl he left behind, the friend standing in the fire. I woke up early the next morning, before the sun had finished climbing out of the ocean. I sat by the window in the guest room, watching the sky shift from gray to coral, sipping coffee like it could steady my hands. The envelope was gone from my purse. I didn't need to check. Sarah was reliable, quiet, loyal, and brilliant under pressure. She'd done what I asked, no fanfare, no drama, just a silent delivery to the bridal suite with everything Rachel needed to know sealed inside. I imagined her finding it, maybe before makeup, maybe while sipping mimosas with her mother, her hands trembling, lips parting as she read. The screenshots, the hotel receipts, the video of Caleb kissing another woman behind a salon chair, the audio Sarah had captured, his careless flirtations from just hours before. Every piece of truth I'd ever swallowed down was in that envelope. By 10 a.m., the house was buzzing. Hairstylists, makeup artists, photographers, all orbiting Rachel like bees around a flower. She laughed too loud, smiled too wide, but I saw it, the hesitation in her eyes, the way she kept glancing at her phone, lips pressed tight. Like she was holding something back. She didn't say a word to me. Neither did Caleb. He looked confident as ever when he arrived at the venue. He wore a black tux, perfect hair, shaking hands like a politician on campaign day. But he didn't look at me, not once, and that told me everything. He knew. The silence between us had grown teeth. I stayed close to Rachel, held her bouquet while she got zipped into her dress, told her she looked breathtaking, which she did, and helped adjust the little pearl buttons at the back of her gown. She was calm, too calm. Until 5 minutes before the ceremony, that's when everything cracked. She called for me softly, like she didn't want the others to hear. I followed her into the side room just off the chapel. She closed the door behind us, then turned around, holding the envelope. Her face was pale. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" she asked, voice like glass. I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because you wouldn't have believed me," I said. "Not without proof, not while you were still in love with the idea of him." She stared at me, fingers tightening around the paper. "You waited until my wedding day." I know, tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. Did you sleep with him? Is that why?" My heart knocked hard against my ribs. "Once, years ago, before you ever met him. He ghosted me. I had no idea it was him until I saw him here." Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me then?" "Because I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want to believe that the man you loved could be that cruel." Rachel's shoulders shook. I reached out, and to my surprise, she didn't pull away. "I didn't want to hurt you," I whispered. "But I also couldn't let him ruin your life." She stepped back, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and said the most unexpected thing. "Then help me." I blinked. "Help you what?" "Help me make this the last wedding he ever ruins." Her voice didn't waver when she said it. She stood there, in her wedding gown, fists clenched around the envelope like it was a sword. Gone was the girl who used to draw hearts in her notebooks. Gone was the bride-to-be who had squealed over centerpiece mock-ups and cake flavors. This Rachel, this woman, was steel-wrapped in satin. I took a breath. "What do you want to do?" Her eyes were clear. "I want him humiliated. Not just exposed, ruined." For a second, I didn't recognize her. And then I realized this wasn't a change, it was a reveal. Rachel wasn't soft, she was kind. And there's a difference. "I have more," I said. "Audio from last night. I haven't even listened to it yet." But Sarah mic'd him. "We've got video too," Rachel exhaled, sharp and heavy. "I need everyone to see it, all of it." There were 120 guests seated outside. Some of them had flown across the country. Her father was crying by the fountain. The officiant was sipping lemonade, reciting the vows in his head. Caleb was out there, probably checking his reflection in the wine glasses. I looked at her. "You're sure?" Her eyes never left mine. He doesn't get to pretend. Not in front of my family. Not after what he did to you. Or Lila. Or God knows who else. That name still burned. Lila Green. A woman somewhere in Miami, making her own plans, completely unaware that her fiancé was about to marry someone else. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she opened the envelope. She pulled out the flash drive. I want it on the screen. During the ceremony. Before the vows. I blinked. You mean you want to play the footage during the wedding? Why not? She said bitterly. He made our entire engagement a performance. I think it's only fair he gets to see how the final act ends. It was brutal. It was brilliant. It was everything I didn't know I needed to hear. So we made a plan. I went to Sarah and told her the truth. She didn't hesitate. She handed me the laptop and helped connect it to the AV system the venue used for reception slideshows. Rachel stayed hidden, pretending to fix her makeup while we rerouted the tech setup. 5 minutes before she was meant to walk down the aisle, I stepped out onto the stage. The music cut. Guests shifted in their chairs. The officiant looked confused, and then the screen flickered to life. At first, it was just audio. Caleb's voice, casual and careless. Don't call me again. I told you, it's handled. Then the footage, him kissing Leela, hotel confirmations, selfies in someone else's bed. Gasps echoed across the garden like falling dominoes. Rachel didn't walk down the aisle. She walked onto the stage, head held high, tears dry. She took the mic from the officiant and said, "Thank you all for coming. There won't be a wedding today, but there will be a reckoning." There was a beat of stunned silence, then murmurs rippling through the crowd like a current, sharp and rising. A few guests stood up, unsure whether they should sit back down or flee. Somewhere near the back, someone dropped a glass, the shatter cutting through the air like punctuation. Caleb didn't move. He stood at the altar, hands at his sides, watching the screen like it was a bad dream that might go away if he blinked hard enough. His face was slack, color draining from it by the second, but it was his eyes that finally met Rachel's across the garden, that gave it away. There was no denial in them, only fear. Rachel held the microphone like it was a blade. "I'm sorry to my family, to my friends. I know many of you traveled far to be here," she began, voice steady, "but I couldn't let today pass without showing you who this man really is. Caleb wasn't just unfaithful. He was engaged to another woman, had a whole second life." Gasps turned to outrage. Her mother covered her mouth. Her father stood, fists clenched. "He lied to me, and to her, and to at least one other woman I know of, sitting in this very garden, who he used and discarded like she was nothing." My throat tightened. She was talking about me. I felt more eyes swing toward me, some widening with realization, some with judgment, but I didn't care, not anymore, because Rachel wasn't ashamed, she was furious, and she was choosing to burn this lie down in front of everyone. "I won't be marrying him today," she said, "or ever, and I hope this moment stays with him for the rest of his pathetic, hollow life." Then she turned to Caleb, who still hadn't moved. "And just so we're clear, you didn't fool me, you fooled yourself, into thinking you were untouchable." He stepped forward, finally. His voice cracked. "Rachel, please, this is all a deep..." She cut him off with one raised hand. "You don't get to speak, not here, not anymore." Then she walked, not down the aisle, but through the center of the guests, veil in her hand, bouquet abandoned on the stage, chin lifted so high it made me want to cry. I followed her without hesitation. So did Sarah. A few others clapped, not many, but enough. Behind us, the murmurs rose again, frenzied, confused, scandalized. Caleb stayed on the stage, shrinking by the second. Rachel and I didn't say anything until we got into the limo. She looked at me, breathing hard, cheeks flushed. Then she laughed, soft at first, then louder. It spilled out of her like something broken, finally letting go. I started laughing too, and in that moment, just the two of us, mascara smeared, adrenaline still pulsing, I knew we hadn't lost anything worth keeping. We had burned the lie and walked away from the ashes together. The limo ride was quiet for a few blocks. Not tense, not awkward, just still. The kind of quiet that comes after a hurricane, when the wind has finally stopped screaming and all that's left are things that matter. Rachel stared out the window, veil draped across her lap like a broken promise. Her fingers played with the edge of it absently. Then she spoke, her voice soft. "Do you think she knows yet, Lila?" I shook my head. "Not unless she found out the hard way like you almost did." She nodded, jaw tightening. "I don't know if that makes it better or worse." There was a long pause, then she pulled her phone from the clutch. She opened her messages, thumb hovering. "I want to tell her," she said. "Not to warn her, but to free her. I want her to know she's not crazy. That she didn't imagine the distance, the nights he forgot to call, the lies about work. I want her to know she's not alone in it." I watched her type out a message. "Hi Lila, you don't know me, but I think we're both engaged to the same man. His name is Caleb, and I just called off our wedding today. I have proof, photos, video, and I think you deserve the truth, just like I did." She hit send before she could overthink it. There was something so defiant about the gesture. Quiet but full of fire. She wasn't trying to ruin Caleb's life. She was just refusing to let him keep pretending he hadn't already done it to himself. I reached into the minibar and popped open 2 small bottles of champagne. No celebration, no toasts, just something cold to hold. Rachel took a sip and leaned her head back. "You know what hurts the most?" she said. "It's not him, it's me. It's the part of me that believed him, that trusted him, that fought to see the good in him, even when the signs were right there." I nodded slowly. "I know that part. I've lived in that part." She looked at me then, eyes glistening. "Why didn't he just break up with you, or with her, or with me?" "Because men like Caleb don't break up," I said. "They wait to be caught. It's the only time they tell the truth, when it's already too late." We rode in silence for another minute. Then Rachel laughed again, this time bitter and sharp. "And to think I spent 8 months planning a party for a ghost." "No," I said quietly. "You spent 8 months building your strength, and today you used it." She reached for my hand and squeezed it. "I couldn't have done this without you, Ivy." "You did it," I said. "I just handed you the match. You lit the fire." As the limo turned the corner, her phone buzzed. It was Lila. Rachel read the message, then passed me the phone. "Thank you," it said. I knew something felt off. I just didn't want to believe it. "I'm so sorry he did this to you, to us. Please, let's talk. I think we both need it." Rachel's lips trembled, but she smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in days. That night, we didn't go home. We booked a last-minute room at a beachfront hotel 2 hours south, somewhere no one would think to look for a runaway bride and her accomplice. The front desk clerk didn't even blink when we walked in. Mascara smudged, still half in wedding attire. She handed us the key, and maybe we were just another story she'd heard. The room smelled like salt and citrus. We opened the balcony door and let the sea breeze in, letting it pull the last of the day's adrenaline out of our lungs. Rachel tossed her veil onto the floor, like shedding a layer of skin. I kicked off my heels. We collapsed onto the bed without a word. It was the first time we could breathe. She looked over at me after a while. "You know what's insane?" "What?" "I almost married him. I almost married him. I almost signed my name next to his on a license. Kissed him in front of my grandmother, let him move into my life and ruin it from the inside out." I nodded slowly. "And now you never will." She stared at the ceiling for a moment. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he didn't ghost you?" That question sat like a stone between us. All the what-ifs, all the might-have-beens. I used to, I admitted. When it still stung, I used to think maybe I said something wrong. Or maybe I just wasn't enough. Rachel turned to look at me, her face raw. "You were enough. He wasn't." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I know that now." She reached for her phone again and opened her messages with Lila. They'd exchanged a dozen texts already. Honest, vulnerable, messy. I could see the threads of a fragile alliance forming. Rachel turned the screen toward me. Lila had just sent another message. We should meet. Maybe not today, but soon. Women like us, we have to stick together. Caleb doesn't get to be the chapter we close with. He's just the page we turned. Rachel smiled. That's the kind of ending I want. I took a sip of wine from the minibar. No, Rach, that's not the ending. She raised a brow. That's the beginning. We spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, not just about Caleb, but about us, our choices, our blind spots, the ways we'd learned to quiet our instincts for the sake of love. It wasn't all laughter, some of it hurt, but it was healing. Before we finally fell asleep, tangled in sheets and old stories, Rachel whispered, "Thank you, Ivy. Not just for saving me, but for never disappearing, even when you had every reason to." I didn't respond right away. I just held her hand and let the waves outside the window say the rest. Because the truth is, I didn't just do it for her. I did it for every woman who's ever been left behind without a goodbye. For every one of us who waited in silence, thinking we were the only ones. But we're not alone. We never were. And for those who stuck with me through this whole story, thank you. You were the quiet in my chaos. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the glass like forgiveness. Rachel was still asleep, her arm draped across her eyes, the way she always did when she was dreaming deep. I sat out on the balcony with a coffee, barefoot, hair still tangled from sleep, watching the waves stretch toward the shore with slow, relentless grace. It hit me then, how quickly the world moves on. Yesterday, we set fire to a life she almost walked into. Today, the ocean didn't care, the tide kept coming. The seagulls still squawked. The world spun on, indifferent to our wreckage, and maybe that's what healing starts to look like. Not forgetting, but realizing the world doesn't end. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Lila. "Thank you again, Ivy. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what he was. But I know this. Men like Caleb count on us staying quiet. I'm glad you didn't," I replied. "Neither did you." I didn't expect her to write back so quickly, but she did. "There's one more thing I think you should see. He gave me a necklace once, said it was his grandmother's. When I saw your name, I realized it wasn't. He gave it to me in the same box you were holding in a photo I found on his old phone. I don't think we were the only ones. I think there are more." I sat still for a long time, rereading that message. More, the necklace, the recycled lies, the routine. Rachel stepped out onto the balcony with a yawn, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Who's texting?" "Leela," I said quietly. "She found something." I told her about the necklace, about the photo, about what it meant. Rachel didn't look surprised. "Of course there are more," she murmured. "Someone like Caleb doesn't stop just because he's almost caught. He only stops when he's cornered." I looked at her, the idea slowly forming like a storm on the horizon. "We could find them," I said. "The others, the women. We could track the stories, build something real, a record, a wall he can't hide behind." Rachel tilted her head. "You mean, like a reckoning?" I nodded. "A digital one, anonymous if they want. A place where his name isn't just erased but remembered for what it really meant. Not by him, by us." She smiled slowly. Not the bright smile from before. This one was deeper, sadder, but stronger. I like that. I didn't know it then, but we'd just started something bigger than revenge. We were building a map of every woman who had ever been made to feel like a footnote, and we weren't alone anymore. Rachel and I packed our things around noon. No fanfare, no dramatic exit. Just a note left behind for the cleaning staff with 2 small champagne bottles and a quiet thank you scribbled on the hotel stationery. On the drive back, Rachel played a playlist, our songs this time. Songs about survival, about fury, about truth. And as the road unwound in front of us, I realized something. Caleb didn't just lose 2 women, he woke up a network. And we were only getting started. In the weeks that followed, the silence after the storm became a laboratory for reinvention. Rachel and I returned home, not to shame or whispers, but to quiet solidarity. At first, people didn't know what to say. A few well-meaning friends reached out with awkward text messages. "He didn't deserve you," or "everything happens for a reason." Others kept their distance, unsure if they should acknowledge the wreckage or pretend it hadn't unfolded in front of an entire wedding party. But we didn't wait for permission to rebuild. We gave ourselves the space. The nights were hardest, the stillness, the little pockets of absence. Rachel told me once that it wasn't Caleb she missed, but the idea of him, the life she imagined. The Sunday mornings, the stupid inside jokes, the belief that someone loved her enough to stay. "I wasn't just losing a man," she said. I was grieving a lie, and I understood that better than anyone. So we got to work. We launched the project 3 weeks later. An anonymous website, clean and simple. A name that didn't scream scandal, just clarity, Shadow Ledger. A place for women to privately and securely tell their stories, not just about Caleb, but about anyone who had twisted love into something that resembled power. We didn't call it revenge, we called it record keeping. Lila was the first to submit, then a woman from Atlanta, then 2 others from San Diego and New York. Their stories lined with familiar phrases. He said I was different. He told me his past was messy, but he was healing. He ghosted me after introducing me to his mom. I thought it was love. It wasn't. Each story felt like a note in a song we'd all been humming alone for too long. By the end of the month, over 30 women had submitted their stories. Rachel read every single one. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she raged, but always she kept going. She started responding, gently, with messages like, "You're not crazy, you're not alone, you didn't imagine it." And slowly I watched her come back to herself. Not as a bride or someone's girlfriend, but as a woman forged in fire and still walking forward. One night, she turned to me with that look in her eyes. "I think we should do a podcast," she said. I raised a brow. "To do what? Name names?" She smirked. "No, to tell the truth, ours, theirs. To shine a light so bright, it burns the shadows out of these stories." I smiled. "You want to make noise?" "Hell yes," she said. "No more being quiet, not after everything." I nodded, heartful. "Then let's make it loud, because revenge might start with silence. But justice? Justice starts when we finally speak." We launched the first episode exactly 2 months after the wedding that wasn't. We called it Burn the Blueprint. Not to be edgy, but because that's what it felt like we were doing, burning the old template of how women were supposed to handle heartbreak, quietly, gracefully, privately. Not anymore. The first episode was raw. Just Rachel and me, sitting in her living room with 2 mismatched microphones and voices that still trembled around certain memories. We didn't script it. We didn't try to be polished. We just talked about what it feels like to be lied to, how betrayal reshapes you, how you can love someone and still walk away. Within 24 hours, the episode had 10,000 downloads. Within a week, we had emails from listeners. Some shared their stories, others just said, "Thank you for saying what I've never had the words for." But one message stopped us both. It was from a woman named Jordan. Her name didn't ring a bell at first, but as I kept reading, my stomach twisted. "I was with Caleb too." Her message began, 7 years ago. I was 21. He told me he was going through a divorce, said I made him believe in love again. Then he ghosted me the night before my birthday. I never heard from him again. I always blamed myself. I thought I'd been too intense, too needy. Rachel whispered, "He's been doing this a long time." It made me sick, the way he'd made a hobby out of women. Like we were stepping stones on his path to wherever the hell he thought he deserved to be. But Jordan's message didn't end with sorrow. "I heard your podcast. I saw the Shadow Ledger. I submitted my story. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt angry. I felt like maybe I deserved to take up space again." That line stayed with me. Maybe I deserved to take up space again. I thought about how many women walk around with silenced heartbreak, how many shrink themselves after someone like Caleb leaves them. We started featuring 1 story per episode, changed names, protected identities, let women reclaim their narratives on their terms. We didn't just dissect what happened, we showed how they rebuilt, how they healed. By month 3, we had sponsors. By month 5, we had press. And one day, Rachel got a cease and desist letter from Caleb's attorney. We laughed for a solid minute, because here's the thing about men like him. They can't stand losing control of the narrative. We framed the letter and hung it above our recording setup. We kept going. Every episode, every submission, every truth spoken out loud, it was another crack in the wall of silence he'd built around his actions. He didn't disappear, but his power did. He stopped showing up in social circles, lost his job at a law firm when his name hit a viral tweet thread. Word got around, but none of it was revenge anymore, not for us. This was something bigger, a network, a reckoning. a restoration. And as Rachel said during our 10th episode into the mic, voice unwavering, we're not here to ruin men, we're here to stop them from ruining us. And I just sat there, listening, smiling, because we were finally the loudest voices in our own story. 1 year to the day after the wedding that never was, Rachel and I stood outside a small studio in Brooklyn, hands trembling. A local podcast network had offered us our own full series, a full production team, a national platform, everything. We hadn't chased fame, we weren't influencers. We were survivors who had learned how to turn silence into strategy, and now into sound. Inside, they'd painted a quote from one of our first episodes on the wall in bold black letters. The stories we're told to bury are the ones that grow roots. I ran my fingers over the paint like it was scripture. The first recording in the new studio felt surreal. Rachel wore a white blazer, the only wedding white she said she'd ever wear again. I wore black, sharp and clean. We looked like bookends to the same story. The topic of the episode, forgiveness, not for Caleb, not even for the others like him, but for ourselves, for the versions of us that didn't know better, for the younger girls who trusted too quickly, who blamed themselves too easily, who thought being left meant they weren't enough. We didn't cry during the episode, not this time. We'd done our crying already. Instead, we told the truth. That you can be wrecked and still rebuild. That you can be fooled and still be wise. That you can lose a man and still find yourself. After the recording, we stepped outside into the cool October air. The city buzzed around us, too alive to care about old ghosts. Rachel looped her arm through mine and looked at me with that quiet, soul-deep certainty. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to the wedding?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. He would have married you, lied to you, broken you down, piece by piece. She nodded. And now? I smiled. Now he watches us from the sidelines while we change the game. Our phones buzzed at the same time. A new submission on Shadow Ledger. Another story, another voice, stepping into the light. We didn't know her name yet, but we would. We'd read her words, we'd amplify her truth. And maybe, just maybe, we'd help her take up space again. Because that's what this became. Not a revenge story, but a revolution.